Slow mesh week 4. John Reed, Jesse Simonton. Well, Jesse, your dogs got my Vols. Your dogs got my Vols. Congrats on the win.
That's 2 playoff teams right there, Johnny. That's 2 playoff teams. I think Tennessee asserted itself and showed that they certainly belong, maybe even a tier higher than I think I had them in the SEC. And I think, as you and I discussed the first couple weeks of the season, the reason you can't ever count out Kirby and these dogs was kind of the column I wrote on my Substack. It's hard to kill a zombie. And I think Josh Heupel learned the hard lesson that you got to double tap. You always double tap. And they didn't go for the kill. And very honestly, I think in multiple times, and you can kind of talk me through it. You and I purposely, I think, kind of saved our thoughts on this game with each other until now. Haven't talked a whole lot at all. I thought there was some real missed opportunities for the Vols there in terms of not kind of going for the jugular. Both teams certainly had breaks. Both teams, caught, advantages by kind of screw-ups by the other. But I thought, that sequence when Tennessee gets the fumble from Gunner and they go run, and they settle for a field goal and they keep a one-score game. I thought that proved to be the difference because, again, you're just barely cracking open the door. Gunner then makes an incredible throw on 4th down, get the 2-point conversion, all the pressure in the world on a kid to kick a 45-yard field goal. College kickers miss kicks all the time. So while he nailed it in overtime, it wasn't a huge shock that, he completely shanked it. And so the Vols leave depressed, and yet, again, I think they got to feel good about their chances the rest of the season.
Had you ever seen ESPN in a kicker's grill like that? Because I was at the game, so I didn't realize what was happening at the time. But when I rewatched it and I saw the pictures and stuff from the footage, I'm like, who on Tennessee is letting ESPN just get right in Max Gilbert's face? And they kept flashing the bottom line. Has never attempted a game-tying or go-ahead field goal in the 4th quarter. And I was like, man, if I had seen that in the stadium, I think I would have bet all my money that Georgia wins that game because the vibes were not good on the rewatch, knowing what happened, knowing what the end result was going to be.
They were not. Scott Van Pelt even joked on his podcast. He told his 2 little boys, he's like, this kid's got no chance in hell at making this kick. Just because of all the scene. They're showing, again, my Substack's called Surrender Cobra. They weren't showing Tennessee fans surrender covering yet, but they might as well have been because they showed the same damn Tennessee fan, I think, about 8 times, just looking terrified if this kick was going to be made. And then, I don't know how you felt on the replay because, again, you were in the stadium, so there's no way you would have been able to really see this in real time, or it would have been very difficult to see it in real time. I think if he actually kicks the ball straight, the game might have ended right then and there, but the other way, because Georgia they had just dudes on dudes looking like they were going to block that thing if it actually goes directly into the path of where the field goals were, and then they may have been running that thing back the other way.
I think that might have been a less deflating way to lose. At least that one, the shock would have gotten you. You could have left versus having to stay the extra 10 minutes to watch overtime go the wrong way whenever everyone knew that overtime was getting ready to go the wrong way. But no, I haven't even noticed that. I'll have to watch the replay of the kick for like the 6th time because
it's like Chris Cole and another guy that if you see it, it's like number 9, Chris Cole, who's like, one of the 5 stars for Georgia. He's going to be really good. He and another guy, it looks like they jumped like their Boss Bailey in like 2002.
In the stadium, an embarrassing amount of people actually thought he made it. Tennessee even fired off their light show and I believe struck up Rocky Top thinking he had made it. It wasn't until the Georgia players were running around and you could see the ref shaking it was no good that I had to tell the people in my section, no, stop celebrating. It's no good. And I just kind of sat there despondent. But I thought I read your article at like 1:00 in the morning last night, laying in bed on Surrender Cobra, which it wasn't in the back of my mind when he missed. The natural instinct is to put your hands on the head, but I'm always like, nope, don't do it. Don't want to end up on TV. Not going to be me. But the double tap zombie thing, I mean, it is just the way that you have to beat teams like that. It just feels like it was going to play that out. Like, I'm in the stands and maybe I'm a little bit more pessimistic or maybe I just look at worst case scenario too much or whatever. But I was screaming for Hypo to go for 2 when he went up 4, just because I think that's actually the way to go. And just in my mind, if you are going to let the game come down to a 2-point conversion with Josh Heupel and Joey Aguilar and these receivers in this run game right now, I would rather be on offense versus defense. So I wanted to go for 2, go up 6. Then all of a sudden the conservative field goal, Jesse, that makes it a 9-point game. And, you kind of joked you made a 1-score game a 1-score game. I thought that was mishandled and you should have gone for 2 with 11 minutes left to make it a 6-point lead. Then, of course, 2 field goals only tie you versus beat you, and there would have been enough time to kick the 2 field goals. And I'm not going to, overly criticize Heupel just because, like you said, those are 2 playoff teams. It looks like he has built a playoff roster. It looks like he's taken Joey Aguilar from the trash heap and turned him into a playoff caliber quarterback. But Heupel needs to realize moving forward, at least until reinforcements come, that this is an offensive team again. The last 2 years he's had to rely on defense. I think that's out the window now. This is an offensive team. And I thought there was paths to be much more aggressive than he was, even going back to the first half.
Not going for it on 4th and 2.
Yep, 8 minutes left in the second quarter, 7-point lead, 4th and 2. You had shown that your offense was rolling. Like, you go for that 4th down. You live with the repercussions if you don't get it. You don't worry about pinning somebody deep. Your defense hasn't shown that they can handle that. Going for that, of course, the after the field goal, or excuse me, after the fumble, being a little bit more aggressive at the end of regulation, trying to get a little bit closer. I think Heupel coached it as if he still had a top 10 defense, and I don't think the defense right now is anywhere near top 10. Now, maybe later down the line, if Jermod McCoy and Hobbs and Moy all get back, maybe then you have a top 10 defense again, but you didn't have one on Saturday, and I thought he let George off the hook a little bit.
Yeah, in agreement there. I thought some of the coaching decisions by both staffs were a little strange. Kirby goes for it when he realizes very early on that it's going to take at least 30 some odd points to win that game. So Georgia goes for the 4th and 3, I think on their own side of the field to extend a drive. But then very oddly, and I don't know how you felt as a Tennessee fan, I just thought it was a strange decision, fan or not, for Georgia to basically be, at the 2-yard line and kick a field goal at the end of the first half instead of just going for the touchdown.
I thought that one is one where if you are kicking off at halftime, you go for it. But the fact they were getting the ball back, he probably thought, hey, we score here, we get the ball out of half, we score again, all of a sudden we got the lead.
And it did play out that way. To your point, Georgia had just came out, downhill smash mouth football after halftime. I just thought in a game where you knew, again, you're going to need at least 30, 35, obviously into the 40s to win, just taking 3 instead of 7 there, kind of strange. But I think the biggest thing for Tennessee is they do obviously have to get that defense right. I was not aware that so many Vol fans suddenly cannot stand Tim Banks for all the goodwill I think he had built up the past 2 years. I guess certainly seemed like he was rightfully so in this game, but I didn't realize there had kind of been such consternation around that program, around him in general. The tackling was terrible, just terrible. I mean, they just got completely exposed in the open field, and that's a concern even with the schedule that you have the rest of the season.
Yeah, Tim Banks is interesting because I do think he's built a better defense than anybody ever thought would happen at Tennessee, under Josh Heupel. I think the defense has a lot of dudes. You saw James Pierce kind of breaking out last night on Sunday Night Football. Joshua Joseph's, breaking out there on Saturday and what should have been a game-deciding, strip fumble. But I think there's just two just huge black marks, and I think Saturday is a third one. Of course, South Carolina hung 63 on you in 2022, and the game plan in Columbus last year, awful. Now, granted, hey, it's Jeremiah Smith, it's Egbuka, it's those guys, but it's also let's maybe don't guard them one-on-one down the field. And then he kind of did the same thing on, against Georgia on Saturday. Gunnar Stockton was able to throw the ball down the field with one-on-one coverage. I still didn't feel like he felt really that comfortable against zone defense, especially if Tennessee was sending some pressure or getting some pressure without blitzing. But I did think too many times they left some cornerbacks on an island that maybe weren't ready for it. I mean, you had a true freshman out there in Ty Redmond, who I thought had great coverage on the game-tying touchdown, but it's a 9 out of 10 throw and a 10 out of 10 catch, and they got you. But I just think with Banks, it seems like against big teams, he's very rarely been able to shut down a good, talented offense, even going back to 2022 against Alabama and Bryce Young, or even 22 against Anthony Richardson and Florida. Just gave a bunch of points.
Well, spinning this forward, how do you now see, we've seen 3 weeks. I got a column today up on the Substack that, look, there's still a lot we don't know about all these teams. We're still learning. But there's some things that I think we know. It's I think. And this sport is going to be extremely unpredictable. It's going to be wild. It's going to be chaotic. But at least we have more data points now than we did 3 weeks ago. How would you tier the current SEC? Because right now it looks like it's going to be I don't know how you feel. I feel like it is going to be like the Anchorman battle royale between maybe 4 or 5 teams where they're all kind of pointing at each other, and it's going to be tiebreakers, and it's going to be, who has the battle axe in terms of the 2 teams that are actually going to get to go to Atlanta.
Yeah, that was the frustrating part, Jesse, was just that's what you lost when you blew that game, is you had the inside track, you had your own destiny. And I don't think you're wrong coming out of it saying it's 2 playoff teams. The problem is Tennessee was on the wrong side of that, so now they have less wiggle room, right? And especially when you look at college, the unpredictability, how tough it is to kind of carry over week, and how tough it is to play on the road. I do think Tennessee's a playoff team, but now you kind of have to be near perfect to solidify that. Do I think Tennessee would get in at 10-2? Yeah, I do. But last year, I think they would have been left out had Alabama and Ole Miss not completely dropped the ball, in their games down the stretch. So you just lose a little bit of control, and that's frustrating, especially, like I said, when all of a sudden the trip to Mississippi State looks a little bit tougher, and the home game against Arkansas and Oklahoma look tougher, and Vandy looks tougher, and you just had a chance to really get a head start on, the conference championship race, but also playoff seeding, and you dropped the ball. You kicked it 15 yards to the right. You blew your opportunity, and that's frustrating. I do still think Tennessee's a top 5 team in the SEC. Through 3 weeks, I feel like Georgia is the only one that I would rank ahead of them in terms of what I've seen, and you could say Tennessee was just as good as Georgia, but of course we know that was in Knoxville. I don't know if that goes the same way in Athens or on a neutral field, but I give Georgia the number 1 on the power rankings. Then after that, I don't think LSU has proven they're better than Tennessee just because they beat a pretty mid-Clemson team and struggled against Florida. I don't think Texas and Arch Manning have necessarily been very impressive. So I think Tennessee, I'd have them right there at 3rd now or 4th, just however you want to split LSU, Texas, and Tennessee. But I think all 3 of those are kind of interchangeable for me, with, of course, me trying to remove the orange-colored glasses.
No, and, you did mention a bunch of teams that are on Tennessee's schedule that may look harder, now than maybe they did 3 weeks ago. I think you could honestly say the same thing about Alabama's schedule. I think Alabama's schedule is more difficult moving forward now based on some of the teams that they're going to have to play versus what we thought it was going to be, back in August. But that also means there's more opportunities to kind of secure more impressive wins. Beating Vanderbilt's now is going to mean more. If you beat an Oklahoma, it would mean more. That trip to Starkville is going to be tough. I think Georgia has the same thing. They have to play at Mississippi State. So a little trickier now for both those teams. But I think that, it's funny because there's going to be this jockeying all, throughout the season. Depending on what happens, I do think it is rather large for maybe a fourth or fifth SEC team that Notre Dame has basically face planted. Now, Notre Dame could still get into the playoff if they, basically went out. But them winning 10 straight looks a lot harder and a much trickier field to navigate considering where that defense is. I mean, Chris Ash, it might as well be Chris Ash right now. They've given up a school record 68 points in 2 games. They're just they're beat up too, which is a problem. Some of their best players in the secondary are hurt. I don't know about you, but everyone's circling that USC game for them as like a playoff eliminator. I think if the defense is playing the way it is right now for Notre Dame, I think Arkansas could put up 30, 35 points on them in 2 weeks, and that's a very dangerous game. So taking away the Irish, that could give the SEC another potential, team to kind of fill that 12-team void.
Yeah, I mean, I know the brands, I know the power there, and I know what the narrative would be if they win 10 games in a row, but I'm going to just go ahead and say that we should eliminate Notre Dame as it is. Like, with looking at the rest of their schedule, at Arkansas and beating USC at home, even if they do win 10 games in a row, that's not worthy of getting them in the playoff. It sucks for them that their 2 losses would be by 3 points and 1 point, and I know the committee would put them in, but that resume just isn't going to be able to hold up. On the flip side, now A&M has a big feather in their cap. Now A&M, if they get to 10-2, that's going to be most likely a win that's going to trump anything Tennessee does have. So I'm already kind of starting to think about the jockeying for playoff position. And that's just what was so depressing about the game, leaving.
But not necessarily. I mean, if Tennessee goes 10-2, a win over Alabama would be more impressive than a win over Notre Dame, I think. Although, yes, Notre Dame is on the road.
That's the only one on the schedule, though. Like, if you go 10-2 and it's not a win over Alabama, then I don't think you have a win that would trump that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I think unless Notre Dame just completely face plants, but I think the schedule's too easy for them to completely face plant. But okay, so give me a couple pieces of what you think. Give me some other broader SEC ones.
Well, here's one that I think it ties into kind of some things you mentioned. This is actually a twofer. One, I have the amount that the media, and I'm certainly a part of this, but and you actually were even more skeptical, so I'll give you credit here. The media just hook, line, and sinker on some of these quarterback narratives in the preseason. And the faceplant we've seen from DJ Lagway has been, he's just like short-circuited. And it's been kind of incredible to watch. Both of us were very skeptical of the Arch kind of just, going ahead and crowning him. Not that he's not going to ultimately be a good football player, but just kind of the legacy each week that he's dealing with and the pressure. It certainly seems like it's getting to him because if he's not hurt, he looks terrible. And so you got Arch, you got Lagway, you've got Garrett Nussmeier, who has been fine, but certainly not impressive. And it's just kind of interesting that, all these quarterback narratives, a lot of the top ones, Lenoris Sellers. I know he got hurt on, Saturday, but he has not been that great either. He still is not throwing the ball over the middle at all. All those guys were basically penciled or pinned into top 5, top 10 lists everywhere. And that has certainly just not come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, I throw Cade Klubnik in there as well.
I know he's
not
there too.
Yeah, I know he's not an SEC guy, but I felt like a broken record for most of the offseason just because I just kept saying I didn't trust any of these quarterbacks. And, like, I was like, surely one of them is going to be good, but, like, I'm not excited about any of these guys. And so far, I don't think any of them has been as good as what we were led to believe there. With Lagway especially, I mean, I was disappointed when LSU picked up that last first down because I wanted him to go out there and see if he could throw a 6th interception. Is it Lagway? Is it Napier's offense? Is it a combination of two? Like, how has it gone so poorly for him through the first part of this season?
Well, I'm not gonna. I don't want to double down on. It's not double down. I guess repeat what I kind of talked about last week. I do think it is at least an element that this is a kid who has not played a ton of college football because he was hurt throughout last season, did come back and beat LSU and Ole Miss, but then missed all of spring with an injury, basically didn't participate in fall camp because he was still nursing that shoulder, and then gets thrown into the fire without playing almost any of 11 on 11. So it's akin, I think, to almost like, a pitcher basically not pitching at all in spring training, getting just warmed up enough to go out there and healthy enough to pitch, but is he actually healthy enough to really get through, a season? And then he just gets, hammered over and over again. He just looks like a guy who's completely rusty, but he also, John, looks like a dude who is just not seeing it and has been figured out. And what I mean by that is a year ago, he was facing a lot of, cover one looks because I think some folks were kind of afraid of him using his legs. And they've just teams have decided, hey, he's not going to run that much. We're going to drop back into more cover 2 stuff. We're going to pressure him in his face. And he's just, it's not only that he threw 5 interceptions, but that he threw the ball almost 50 times. And that just as a whole just seems unsustainable for almost any quarterback, much less a guy as green as DJ Lagway.
Where is the running gone for DJ Lagway? Is it because of the injury concerns? Is that why he is not running anymore? Because, I know he was sacked 3 times and lost 18 yards on those sacks, but to still have only, basically 6 rushes for 30 yards, that's not what he really needs to make this offense go. The passing obviously wasn't working really in the last 2 games. How has he not been out there running the ball more? Like, I guess is my question, because he's supposed to be kind of a dual threat guy. Yeah.
I'm on the same thing. That offensive line, I will say on the flip side, it is pretty notable how wrong I think, myself included, was about the LSU narrative going into this season, which was, can Blake Baker's defense be good enough to basically balance what everyone thought was going to be a super dynamic LSU offense to give them this complete team, that they have not had the last couple of years? Hell, that has been a complete 180 where Blake Baker has got those boys on the bayou hunting. Pyburn from Florida, that transfer, he's just a guy that throws his face mask, into every play. He's a battering ram. The reinforcements in the secondary. Harold Perkins looks like he's found a home kind of at that nickel hybrid edge spot. LSU's defense looks hell on wheels, and yet on the flip side, Garrett Nussmeier could barely get the offense to 10 first downs. They can't run the ball at all. Jaden Daniels has got to be like, what the hell? If I had this defense 2 years ago, not only would I win a Heisman, but I might have won a national title too. And so it's just, Brian Kelly is, getting chummy with reporters afterwards because they're asking about their third downs and how they can't, stay on the field at all. And I don't think anyone saw that this version of LSU where it's, almost like an old Les Miles team that's just awesome defensively and does just enough to get by on offense.
Are you buying LSU as a contender?
I think you have to because the defense is this good. If the defense seems real. Now, I think if you're a pessimist or a skeptic, you could say, well, they've played a pretty bad Clemson offense and an even worse Florida one. So
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. The defense has been propped up, and they have not really been tested. Now they play Ole Miss on the 27th, and Ole Miss, despite what they did against Kentucky, can go out there and score some points and can play some offense. So I think they can make me a believer if they kind of shut down that offense in Oxford.
And to tie this to our quarterback narrative or conversation, I think right now I would trust LSU more so than I would trust Texas. Because I think Arch has been that bad, and even though I love Texas's defense from Simmons to Hill, Muhammad and Taffy, I think that, again, it's not only that Arch has been bad, John, but the offensive line is underwhelmed trying to replace those two NFL tackles. Wingo and those guys at receiver have not been nearly as good as I think folks expected. And then the running back room just continues to be kind of a mash unit where Baxter can't stay healthy. The backups hurt. Wisner's hurt too. It's just I'm not really liking what I'm seeing from a lot of aspects of that Texas offense, starting obviously with Arch, but he's certainly not the lone culprit.
All right, putting you on the spot here. Top 5, give me your top 5 SEC teams. You can split them up in tiers if you want and make it like 6 or whatever. But we're kind of, we're through a quarter of the season. 3 weeks of 12, give or take. I know there's a couple extra in there. But
No, I got you. I got you. I'm going to run it. It's Georgia, LSU, and this isn't necessarily in a particular order, just running off 5. Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, Bama. And I think I still probably would, just because I like their upside defensively, would lean Texas over A&M. But that could be a game where it's those two teams are basically playing for that 5th spot.
All right, so Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, Bama. Okay. Bama and Texas.
And Texas. And then Again, I could see LSU or I could see A&M and Texas kind of duking it out maybe for that 5th spot. And then that next tier for me would probably be your Ole Misses. You can't sleep on what Missouri's doing. I keep saying that, on this show in the preseason, I said Ahmad Hardy was probably my dark horse to win SEC Player of the Year. He had he averaged more yards per rush, which was like 11.3. Than Missouri even gave up passing yards total in that game. I know it was only Louisiana, but still, that man is just rumbling. Couple touchdowns, 250 yards. The Tigers are rolling. So we'll see once they play a real team, but you got to like what they've done thus far.
Well, the thing about teams like Missouri, it's very frustrating as a Tennessee supporter, is just those next tier teams. Some of those schedules are easy when you look at Missouri, but B, like, the Missouri, Auburn, like Oklahoma, and even A&Ms of the world, like they can kind of prop each other up if one team is able to kind of win that round robin, that battle royal. Like if Missouri can, South Carolina felt a little extreme falling all the way out of the top 25. I don't know if that's even considered a quality win for Missouri this weekend, but like, you play 14th Alabama, 22 Auburn, 20th Vanderbilt, 10th A&M. If you can kind of navigate your way there and go 2 for 2 or 2 out of 2 or 2 and 2 out of 4, all of a sudden you got a resume that might get you in at 10-2, and then you're also propping up the teams that you lose to. So, I do think Missouri and Auburn and even A&M, I think kind of benefit from that second or third tier, whatever you want to put them. So the 5 teams.
We're going to find out a lot more about Auburn this weekend, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they get I had that just pulled up until I looked at the standings just then. They get Oklahoma this weekend. So it's one of those where, if Auburn wins, they're going to get catapulted into the top, 12. If they lose, Oklahoma's kind of going to be solidified with 2 pretty good wins with them in Michigan. And Oklahoma would all of a sudden be out of the first quarter of their season or first, trimester of their season, I guess because they'd have 4 wins at that point, feeling pretty good about themselves with 2 ranked wins.
Yeah, and I don't know what you're going to also say about the top 5 that I rattled off, but that, the next couple of weeks are going to, I think, tell us a lot more about Texas too, just because, it's very concerning what Arch put up, 114 yards, less than 45% passing, incompletions on 10 straight attempts at one point in the first half. To do that against UTEP is concerning, especially knowing that Texas is about to roll. Again, Florida's given up 2 touchdowns, I think, all season. Defense, Billy Napier's got those boys playing hard on defense. Ron Roberts and those guys. But their offense has been just, an abject disaster. Well, Texas is still going to have to face that defense in Gainesville. And then you got Red River the next week. Come before, a couple weeks before Halloween, we're going to know a lot more about these Longhorns.
Yeah, and obviously that's going to be the case with more teams in the conference too. I was just going to say, of those 5 teams you gave me, you flirted with the idea of the SEC getting 5 teams in. I was going to ask if you thought those were the 5 playoff teams, or if the schedule was just not going to work out that way for some of them.
No, I would say yeah, and I guess my only hedge there would be that could come down to like that A&M Texas game. I had in my preseason predictions that A&M was going to get in, and that they certainly could with both their schedule and the fact that they could maybe have the opportunity to secure a huge tiebreaker against Texas right, at the end of the season. One of my quarterback takeaways, I will say, Ty Simpson's looked pretty damn good the last 2 weeks. It was a debacle at Florida State, but he was pretty flawless against Wisconsin. I don't know if you got to see any of that.
I didn't. I saw the stats, and it just makes me wonder, and maybe it's not fair to him to be like, okay, well, now you got to go to Georgia and prove it. But I was going to ask you if it's something you're legitimately buying into, or you look at, Louisiana Monroe and a pretty lifeless Wisconsin team and say that, okay, that's cute, do it against a real team.
There certainly may be some of that, but I will say he looks like he's playing in rhythm. He carved up the Badgers. That may be a dead team too. I mean, you talk about 2 coaches that got fired this weekend, and Pry at Virginia Tech and Foster at UCLA. I don't know how long Fickle is for Wisconsin. That is just not working out. Simpson basically threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, and Ryan Williams dropped a touchdown. It could have been even better. So certainly he'll have to face a much stiffer test in 2 weeks in Athens. But I do think they have to feel much more comfortable in Tuscaloosa that maybe we did choose the right guy out of camp, not panicking and turn into the 5-star freshman in Russell right now. Let it kind of marinate, and let's see what happens kind of the rest of the season with Ty.
Yeah, I mean, 41 of 46, for 600 yards, 7 touchdowns, and no interceptions. I know I said it's against Louisiana Monroe and Wisconsin, but that's still pretty good against air. You know what I mean? To go 41 of 46. Right. So I think you're right about Ty Simpson. Like I said, it's not fair because they had to a bye week before they have to go to Athens. But, hey, if Joey Aguilar can throw against that defense, good luck, Ty. You got to go show that you can do it too.
Yep. 100%. Not wrong.
Did Ryan Williams finally get him 100 yards? Did he finally end that streak? Yep. All right. Good for him.
I think he did. Yeah, he did. Because he did have a big. He dropped a touchdown, but he also had an insane touchdown too.
Okay, 165 yards and 2 touchdowns for him. So he got to end his drought as well. All right. Anything else from week 3 stand out to you before we look at 4?
Well, I guess again, just kind of double down on my who's good, who's not good in terms of the quarterbacks. I don't know if you saw Avery Johnson's stat line, but that was just one of the grossest. I mean, like Kansas State is just an abomination of a football team. But you talk about, a lot of Tennessee folks, and I understand it. You're right there. Makes total sense. The revenge porn stuff with Nico Iamaleava is is not unexpected. I get that, but I think Avery is every bit of a 5-star who has just been, a cataclysmic bust. He threw for 88 yards on nearly 30 attempts, I think, on Friday night. He minus 16 yards rushing. He has just been that entire Kansas State program's got some sort of, they come from Ireland and they can't get that potato stink off of them. I mean, it is just horrible.
It almost feels like it would deter other teams from going to Ireland. When you look at what happened to Florida State last year and now what's happening to Kansas State, there's a curse there of losing that game.
Not wrong. Not wrong.
All right, let's look ahead to week 4 in the SEC. You kind of talked already about Auburn and Oklahoma. I guess that's the game of the weekend, right? We have 4 teams on a bye as byes start happening. Alabama, Georgia, both getting a week to prepare for their gigantic matchup. Kentucky getting a week to figure things out. A&M getting a week to go get in a circle and tug on each other and celebrate that win against Notre Dame. But, yeah, the only ranked matchup in conference this week, Auburn at Oklahoma. That's it.
Well, I in the preseason, I thought this was going to be a loser leaves town match for Hugh or Brent Venables. I think you could have gotten pretty damn good odds on one of those coaches being fired by the end of the season, and yet again, narratives change, predictions change, and through 3 weeks, Auburn was able to kind of squeak by and beat Baylor. So that was, Hugh was able to kind of get that, notch that, in his chamber. And then for Oklahoma, it was a must win. We talked about it against Michigan 2 weeks ago, and they handled business. So I think the mood around both those programs isn't what we maybe expected. Now, that doesn't mean it can't get sour quickly. And so
I was going to say, I'm not giving up on the loser leaves town mentality because I think if one of these teams loses and ends the feel good, you could see it unravel a little bit for either one of them.
Especially how it happens, John.
Right.
If with the investment that both of these teams have made in their roster, specifically offensively, if this goes poorly for one of these teams, if John Mateer, just kind of snow dives in his first big SEC road start, or if Hugh loses yet another game at home on the Plains, this is it's going to be it should be a really fun game. 3:30 Saturday. I was actually kind of surprised about you. I was surprised that game day didn't decide to go there instead of going to Miami, but was a strange
Is that just
choice.
them trying to show like a different conference some love? Is that like, hey, here you go,
Yeah.
ACC, here's a bone? Like, I get it. Obviously, if Florida's undefeated, but 1-2 Florida team that looks dead, I can't imagine they want to go and cover that. The good news for Oklahoma in this game is win or lose, they get Kent State next week. So, like, that should be kind of a continuation of vibes. But if Auburn loses this game, they go to A&M the week after, and then a bye week before Georgia. Yep, Georgia. Yeah. So, like, there's a chance they go from 3-0 to 3-3. So that's why I'm not giving up on this Hugh Freeze thing maybe falling apart if they lose in Norman on Saturday.
Which, for some of these big coaching candidates, I don't know about you, some of these lists that have come out from Virginia Tech and UCLA have been laughable. I mean, someone had Kalen DeBoer on a UCLA list, which was just insane. But I think that the Florida job and the Auburn job are 2 jobs that a lot of folks nationally have circled of, our coach would be really interested in that job, or an agent is like, we want our guys to get involved with that job. And so you just rattled off Auburn's schedule the next few games. If they do lose on Saturday, based on what's upcoming, it certainly could get late early, I should say, for Hughes, even though everyone's kind of feeling good on the Plains right now.
You buying Oklahoma? at all? Like, I mean, I know there's questions about Mateer and his style and whether or not he can take the punishment, of an SEC schedule and come out alive in November. But, that would be two pretty good wins because the Auburn win's going to look good, at least on paper for now. That'd be two big home wins heading into a bye week. Like I said, they get Kent State after that. So they could be 5-0 heading into the Red River shootout. That's right. I'm not calling it the Red River rivalry. I'm keeping the name alive. Take that. But, yeah, I mean, like Oklahoma could be 5-0 and in the top 10 in the country, feeling pretty good. And I would say at that point probably favored over Texas with, just assuming Texas continues to struggle a little bit.
I don't think you can rule it. Yeah, no, I don't think it's extreme because I think, again, this is a team that has invested heavily through the portal. This is a team, another one of a teaser for my Surrender Cobra piece today on what I think coming out of week 3 is I do think that Oklahoma is now going to be one of the not Oklahoma in general, but the market inefficiency of the quarterback QB or quarterback OC combo is going to become more and more prevalent in college football. Basically, Tyson Helton, former Tennessee offensive coordinator, kind of started this whole thing several years ago at Western Kentucky, bringing in the guys from Incarnate Word and then Washington State. And this has just become a trickle-down effect. Vanderbilt, Clark Lee did it last year with the New Mexico State crew. He brought in the offensive brain trust, also brought in quarterback Diego Pavia. Well, Oklahoma did that this offseason. They brought in Arbuckle and Mateer together from Washington State. You've seen Utah, who plays a huge game this weekend against Texas Tech. They're one of the big Week 4 games. They did the same thing, bringing in Beck and Dampier. I think more and more of these programs are going to do that. So I think Oklahoma's hit on this combo with Mateer and Arbuckle. I am skeptical. You teased it, but I think it does have some validity because their running back room has been so bad. I don't know what's going on with Jaden Ott, but he had just ain't been it, which is a hard pill to swallow for Oklahoma considering they allegedly paid that kid somewhere north of $700,000. And that's a lot of money to be invested in your running back room for a guy you're getting next to zero production from. If Mateer does have to keep taking all these hits, one would think it's going to add up, by the end of an SEC slate. But right now he seems to be doing well, and he continues to, sit atop a lot of these Heisman boards, and they're liking what they got in Norman.
Jaden Ott, I know what happened. He got rich and quit trying. He said, here's $700,000. This is great. I'm going to go enjoy this $700,000 as a 21-year-old, and I'll worry about the NFL later. It'll be fine. This is great. This is great having some money. Living in Norman, Oklahoma, not so much. I'm just going to focus on spending this money. Just running through the slate real quick. You tell me upset alert or not. Arkansas, kind of a can't-lose game headed to Memphis if you are looking at, Sam Pittman's his safety in Fayetteville. Are you worried about Arkansas headed to Memphis?
I mean, I guess you could put some concern on there just because they may have a look-ahead spot to a huge home game against Notre Dame the next weekend. But Taylor Green's been awesome. Yeah. And Bobby Petrino's got him cooking up something. So I think they can score enough points to get by.
Yeah, I mean, if Memphis wins this one, all of a sudden they start, creeping into that conversation of Group 5 playoff team if they're able to get them an SEC scalp. UAB at Tennessee, 40-point favorites. We're not even going to entertain the idea of upset alert there. What about Tulane? Tulane going to Oxford to play Ole Miss.
Not so fast, my friend Lee Corso. That's a scary spot for Lane. Just because that's one where you are expected to win, you're expected to handle business easily. But Summerall's got those boys playing. He would love nothing more than, to use your phrase right there, get an SEC scout, on his resume as he hopes to become an SEC coach next season.
Yeah, Mississippi, next week they get LSU, so a little bit of a look-ahead
And
game for them, too.
Retzlaff looks a lot more comfortable now 3 weeks into the season in that Tulane offense than he did in week 1.
What about Mississippi State? They're hosting Northern Illinois.
No, I think Shapen and the boys will be all right.
Georgia State headed to Vanderbilt. It's a revenge game. Georgia State got them last year.
Yeah, I think Clark Lee's gonna try to put the hammer down there.
Yeah, same for Sam Houston State over Texas. So, a lot of these SEC teams, they are playing with landmines. You can't really stumble. We got, Auburn, Oklahoma. We kind of talked about that one already. And, South Carolina, Missouri loses a little bit of steam with Sellers going out and them losing. It's kind of a can't lose game for Missouri and their chances.
What do you think? What do you think about all the Beamer talk around Vatek? I don't know if you saw my tweet, but I'm so glad that I put this out Saturday night, because then I do feel semi-justified with some of the stuff that is since matriculated on the street, so to speak, in the last 24 hours. So I put out basically, I don't remember word for word, but basically said, kind of spare me all the talk about, basically the Brent Pryce is going to get fired either tomorrow or soon. He did end up getting fired yesterday. But that spare me with all the talk about how good of an attractive job Virginia Tech is when their AD was crying poor just 3 weeks ago. And then they and it's not like 2000 or 1999 to 2010 anymore. Basically, since Clemson became Clemson, which they're not Clemson anymore, another story for another day. But since Clemson became Clemson, Vatek has just receded to the middle pack of the ACC, and they have basically been a 7-5 team. So don't tell me how attractive of a job it's going to be just because Sandstorm is awesome and Lane can get popping when they're actually good.
Now Virginia, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty solid recruiting grounds like for in-state talent. Is that fair?
Virginia Beach, Norfolk, that area, it has historically produced. I mean, that's where Vic, Percy Harvin, some of those guys came from back in the day.
That's the only thing, and them being like the premier state school in Virginia, because I view them as a bigger brand than Virginia, obviously. That makes me think it's possible that the right hire could go there and get them back to 8-4, 9-3 with a chance in the ACC to break through, but I don't think people are going to be beating down the door. It would have to be someone like Beamer who just wants to come save his daddy's program. It feels like that's the only kind of path to poaching a good coach.
Well, the funny thing about Shane is I don't think there's any way he would entertain leaving South Carolina an SEC job for Vatek unless it gets so bad in Columbia where he has basically put them on an expectations level that are unrealistic for that program. And what I mean is I think it's like since before World War II that a coach left South Carolina for another job. Basically, you go to South Carolina, you get fired. Does Shane know that? Kind of seemed like he did if you watched that SEC documentary that came out on Netflix where his wife's basically saying as much. So if he thinks the vibes aren't where they need to be in Columbia, I think that's the only way he entertains kind of, following daddy's footsteps and trying to take over there, because that would be an odd pressure cooker in Blacksburg, but maybe he would be given the grace that he certainly wouldn't be given anywhere else.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but they just got their ass kicked by Vandy and they're 2 touchdown underdogs at Missouri. So
I know
those vibes that you're talking about, they might be a crumbling soon. And if Kentucky football fans can get fed up with Mark Stoops.
But it's advice from the fans.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If I'm a fan, this is supposed to be a playoff year. We're supposed to have the Norris Sellers, who's like a top 5 draft pick, and all of a sudden we're 2-2 after losing to Vandy and Missouri. We're supposed to be competing with the next tier of SEC teams. That's a good way to ruin the vibes there. And if Kentucky fans can get fed up with Mark Stoops, I'd imagine South Carolina fans can get fed up with Beamer too. I could see that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and the fans have also, I was not critical of South Carolina fans because I understand fandom. You think in the most optimistic.
Some are very pessimistic, Jesse. Not all fans are optimistic.
Okay, but it is easy to drink the Kool-Aid, and there was a lot of Garnet Kool-Aid coming out of Columbia this offseason. And hey, we're not going to miss all these defensive linemen that got drafted, in the NFL. We're not going to miss the fact that we're not really sure that Nick Harbor actually can play receiver, and we also lost this first-round safety and Nicky Amore. And so, growth isn't linear. And they just thought because they won 9 games, they're going to win 10, 11, whatever this season, even though the schedule was hell. And you really weren't sure what you were going to get from the Sellers either. And lo and behold, like you said, they just got blown out by Vanderbilt. And now they're 2 touchdown dogs to a Missouri team on the road.
All right, let's end this with some questions real quick. Go subscribe at Jesse's Substack, The Surrender Cobra. You get his articles right in your email, and you can read them in bed like I do at 1 a.m. at night when you can't sleep. At this point in the season, if you're an NFL team, could you even imagine taking one of these quarterbacks in the first round given the options?
Which quarterback?
Just all the quarterbacks. Like any of these quarterbacks in the country right now, do you view any of them worthy of being excited about if you are an NFL fan base that, is waiting and desperate for quarterbacks? We were told all offseason this was going to be a deep, deep draft, but none of those names have really panned out and should, really be inspiring too many fan bases.
I think that there's enough time for folks to still buy into Nussmeier, because I think enough of the guys, if you trust the Todd McShays and those sorts of guys, they know more about quarterbacking certainly than I do, and they still seem to find things that they like about him. Now, all the other guys, you're totally right. I never bought into the Cade Klubnik NFL stuff anyways, but that should just be a complete write-off. There's no way Arch is coming out. Some of the younger guys certainly look pretty damn good. Dante Moore and Sayin and some of those guys, they're not draft eligible. So, but yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, maybe folks have talked themselves into Mateer too, depending on what happens with him.
I believe Moore would be draft eligible. I think this is his 3rd year, right? So he would be draft eligible, although that'd be a huge climb for him. He was Nico's class because I just remember Chip Kelly threw him out there.
Yeah. That's right. And then he sat out last year. Yeah. You're right.
So he would be draft eligible. I don't know if he can ascend that highly that quickly, but I gotta say the Nussmeier stuff, I might be wrong. I'm not as bullish or on him not being good. Even whenever we were doing this all during the offseason, I was like, he's fine. But I will say that under no circumstance, if I was an NFL franchise, would he excite me without really going off. Like he might be a good NFL quarterback, but that's not one you want to draft in the top 2 or 3 as a savior. That would be pretty scary as a fan base.
And on the flip side, I don't know if he would excite anybody either, but I will say on the flip side, Carson Beck is slowly climbing his way back up the boards and being that potential top 5 guy, because he has looked pretty darn good through 3 games for the Canes.
Yeah, put me in the same boat with him. He might be a good quarterback, but I would not be excited to end up with Carson Beck. A lot of Titans fans are talking about trading back and drafting one of these guys this year. Cam Ward might not work out, but Cam Ward's a lot more exciting to me, and I got a lot more hope with him than any of these names we're mentioning now. Another question
he had yesterday was insane.
It was nice. The rest of the game,
the rest of the game, Jared Verse was beating his ass, but
Jared Verse and Byron Young are both really good at football, and the Titans still can't fix their offensive line, but that's for a different podcast. Another question: with the success of the older transfer quarterbacks, will we see a further shift in the NIL market of paying grad transfer quarterbacks over young 5-stars that have no guarantee of success or even sticking around?
Tennessee's won the trade. Is this a question of the Nico for Joey trade?
I would say it's Mateer as well. I would say it's Mateer and, how much better he's looked over, someone like Jackson Arnold, who was the 5-star guy they paid to come be the face of the program. I'd say it's Joey Aguilar and Mateer.
Yeah, and guys, even I would say you got to include like Mendoza at Indiana. He's been a nice fill in there. Conversely, I mean, we mentioned Dante Moore. I mean, Dante Moore was a 5-star, and he chose kind of an irregular path where he did not try to seek immediate playing time after it didn't work with Chip at UCLA. Found a great home at Oregon, sat out, learned some stuff behind Dylan Gabriel, and now seems to be flourishing in Willie Stein's system. I think who the 5-star kid that everyone's going to want a year from now is that kid from Cal. JKS, Sagapatulitele, I think I pronounced that right, or tried to get close. That kid's got an arm, and it would not surprise me at all if he's playing at either LSU or Miami a year from now. So I think the transfer quarterback thing, having the older player, the guy with experience, even someone like Joey Aguilar who had some flaws, it's shown that if you find the right system and the right scheme, you can still, flourish. And again, reiterating a point I made earlier in this podcast and have on my Substack today, I think you're going to see even more of these QB quarterback combos where maybe it's not necessarily the 5-star, but if you can get a guy that is doing really well in a specific system and that OC is available as well, why not just go ahead and bring in this perfect marriage instead of doing this like forced union where, it's a quarterback who has to learn a new system with a new OC and all that. So there's some truth, I think, to all these answers here.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's the grad transfer, like you said, as much as it is just bringing any quarterback in at any time, like a Dante Moore or like the kid from Cal who's going to be a hot commodity. You just get them when you can get them. I will say that, ultimately, I think it's going to be tough for big programs to let quarterbacks learn on the job. It's almost like you're going to have to be a proven commodity. You might not be an old man. You might not be a 24-year-old Joey Aguilar, but I don't know if I want you taking your first starts under center for me if I'm a program with realistic expectations.
Well, that's a great jumping off point. Or not, we don't have to get into this late in the podcast, but that's an interesting teaser question for Tennessee's future.
Yeah,
because they have this 5-star coming in, but does Heupel a year from now opt to bring in another veteran transfer, or does he roll with one of these other guys that's been on the roster versus the upside of the 5-star that you've kind of promised the world to?
The real answer, Jesse, is probably that Tennessee is going to do what they've been doing a lot of the last couple of years. They're going to lawyer up, and they're going to try to go get him another year of eligibility because he only played 2 years at App State and 1 year at Tennessee, and they'll probably try to go and say he deserves a 4th year, if I'm guessing.
Yeah, and does that scare off their 5-star freshman?
You would think not. You would think that'd be ideal for a 5-star freshman. Just sit behind for 1 year, the guy's automatically gone, and you get the reins a year later. I don't know if we've gotten
That's what Bryce Underwood. That's what LSU thought with Bryce Underwood, and he decided he'd rather take the bag and go play from day one at Michigan.
Well, see, that was the thing, though. He took the bag. He took a lot more money. So, if the money was the same, I don't know if he does it. If the money was the same, but the money was bigger and he got to play. But yeah, and quite frankly, if I'm Tennessee and that's the case, I'd rather have Joey Aguilar for another year at age 25 if he's able to play versus, putting all of my future on a freshman quarterback like Faison Brandon. So it'll be an interesting game of chicken. But yeah, I imagine there's going to be a lawsuit and him trying to get another year of eligibility because of how much money he can make NIL-wise as a starting quarterback at Tennessee, especially if the year goes the way that you said you thought it was with it being 2 playoff teams. All right, Jesse, that'll do it for us this week. Appreciate your time. Go subscribe to the podcast wherever you get it. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the thumbs up button. Maybe even throw it a hype throw some comments, help us get our numbers up over there, and go subscribe to the Surrender Cobra. I'll put the link right there in the description on YouTube. Until next week, my friend, have a good week.
You too, brother.
See you, buddy.